What is grace? Well, maybe we should start with what grace is not. We live in a world today where it seems like everyone's just trying to look out for a brand. And even church has just become a brand in so many places. Grace is not a brand. You can't buy it or sell it because the price is immeasurable. Grace is not a hierarchy. It's not a top-down kind of thing where only the elite get to play. Instead, it's a place where everyone's invested, a place where we all have something to give. Grace is not passive. It takes work. Sometimes the work is hard, but wherever grace exists, it exists because someone had a dream to take it there. This is the story of grace, and it starts with the next generation.
Yes. It's so funny. Hold on. Excuse all the Peter McFarland pictures. Where is it? Alex!
Hey, so to get a read.
So I'm Alex Anderson. I am 16 and I'm going to be a junior at Brookwood High School. And I am a lug head at Grace Snellville, and I also lead worship in Lug and True North.
What'd y'all get?
A lug head is basically where the high schoolers disciple and minister to the middle school students. You know, with my peers when I was in middle school, the anxiety and depression thing is very, very real for them.
This verse was one that I discovered when I was going through some anxiety and stuff like that.
This has probably escalated since COVID and everything. People felt alone because, you couldn't go see your friends because you were scared that you were going to get sick.
It says, do not be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication.
I've dealt with that myself, feeling really lonely. And I remember specifically one of my lug heads, just growing up with them in middle school. Of course, they were, 3-4 years older than me. Just really feeling like she cared that, I had a rough day, praying with me, texting me, being like, hey, are you doing okay? Stuff like that. Them being there, it just made me feel loved. They were loving me and showing me God's love, and I just really wanted to do that for someone else.
At Grace, our DNA is discipleship, and our heart beats to the next generation. And we believe that it is really important to pour into the generation under us. Lug is our middle school ministry. At Grace, we have students who are lug heads, and they get excited about discipling these middle school students. But that doesn't just stop when they graduate from high school. They continue to carry that into college, and they become house church leaders, and they start discipling those freshman college students. And it continues on. They leave college, they look for churches, and they get involved in their church, and they start doing the same thing again, pouring into the generation under them.
At Grace, with our students, we're invested in discipleship and leadership. Grace wants to be the first leadership ask in every person's life. Because what we found is, when students get to hear from God and are discipled, and when students get to act with God and lead, they never get over what they experience when God is using them to help someone else. Grace is a series of leadership stories called out of normal places in order to lead. When Jesus called his disciples, he didn't call his disciples based on their accomplishments. He called them based on their potential. In other words, Jesus called disciples, but he always saw leaders. And at Grace, we see you as a potential leader, that God has somewhere for you to go, that God has something for you to do, that there is the extraordinary locked in the ordinary of your life, and it is just waiting to break out.
I'm John Murray. My career has been in technology. Part of what I love about my career journey has been to build and launch businesses inside corporates or enterprises. All these businesses have been global, so I've had the opportunity to travel to 37 different countries and work across culture in that role, and I'm just drawn to that challenge of launching the new thing. But I'm here in Atlanta and traveling regularly to Asia. And so one Saturday, I wake up and I go, well, what am I doing? I'm a family man and my family is on the other side of the planet. So I'm 40, early 40s, my career is supposed to be on this trajectory and I feel like it's going on this trajectory. It is super confusing on what is God doing in my life, honestly. And there's a guy I was working with regularly in China named Robert Yu. That was his Western name. And we're in Beijing at a big conference. It's in the evening and we're walking back to the hotel. And I just started telling my faith story to Robert. And I'll never forget this. He said, John, I've been working with people from Atlanta for 10 years. Why are you the first one to tell me about Jesus if it's truly meant for Chinese people? And it was the first time I began to think about how does my faith and my work begin to come together. Like any planning you want to do? And so when we came into Grace, we heard about the work they're doing with Muslim people, how we're trying to work across culture. Grace is super involved in Kosovo. We hear about these students coming over, the work we're doing over there, and my amazing wife goes, we probably ought to go to Kosovo. And I'm a guy who loves to travel, so when she says something like that, it takes me about 30 seconds to say, okay, let's go. So in 2018, we go over, and it's a medical mission. I'm not really adding any value. It's not really anything entrepreneurial that's going to happen there. And I just remember feeling that nudge from God just saying, hey, you wanted to do something entrepreneurial, buckle up. And I decided to have a heart attack. So now we have a week that is in Kosovo that's unplanned. And we just began exploring the idea of, could we do something entrepreneurial in Kosovo? Obviously, the ultimate hope is following Jesus, but if you don't have a job and you don't have a way to make a living and you don't have something sustaining you, we had started working on an entrepreneurial venture to encourage and potentially fund some startups. Fast forward to today, this team is still there. They're still there, they're still working, they're still engaging, and they're starting to see some success. And no matter what age you are, it's never too late to get started. And I couldn't really spell missions. I thought I was called initially to be just a businessman. God just takes that little step of faith, that little step of obedience, and uses it to impact lives.
When you give to Grace, you're part of something bigger than yourself and even bigger than your individual churches. It's a family of churches making impact in every place locally, but globally together, banding together in a way that helps all of us make a big difference than any one of us could make on our own. The mission of the Grace family of churches is to cultivate a movement of healthy churches that multiply next generation leaders, plant churches, and catalyze Jesus movements in the Muslim world. One of those pillars is about multiplying healthy churches. In fact, the church you're sitting in right now exists because someone at some other church believed it should be there. The truth is, every one of our churches could be good on their own, but we can only be great when we work together. This is what we call the Grace family of churches.
My name is Olu Akinwande, born and raised in the DC area, worked 5 years in the corporate world. Currently right now, I am Grace Family Fellow. I've always had this dream of being a Black leader of a multicultural, multi-ethnic, multi-generational church community. So the fellowship was designed to raise the next generation of church planters. Chris Moorman was the head recruiter. He saw something on my life and saw the fruit that me and my family were producing. We were leading a house church movement, so we were just doing church in a house. And he was like, man, I think you need to get out of the DMV area and go into a new context so that God can grow something inside of you. And so he pitched the idea of moving to Atlanta for us to leave our jobs, our house, our friends, our family. Grace had this invitation to be apprenticed under them and actualizing and being equipped to pursue this kingdom dream of planting a church. And so we said yes. Yeah, it was hard. I mean, imagine going from a house that you own, 3-floor house, to moving in a basement with 1 bedroom and living in the basement of someone that you don't know. A logical person would think, that's crazy, that makes no sense. You're leaving safety, you're leaving money, well, you're leaving the upward trajectory of what Americans would consider success. You're leaving all of these things, and for what?
This is for my daddy, like that. This is for like.
And I think Jesus is worth it. When I think about my daughter and for the kids that we have, I want them to be able to say, man, Mom and Dad heard God and risked everything. I can do that as well.
To come.
The 18-month fellowship, it was just a lot of hands-on ministry and really getting a chance to love the people that we're serving and given opportunities to communicate and preach.
And so I just love how the Lord just speaks so gently and eloquently to my wife. She gets this slingshot. And so this slingshot means multitudes to me. Because it's in this slingshot, we go back. Financially, it's definitely going back in this fellowship. Relationally, I don't know nobody here, it's going back. But the tension in this season is actually for it to be released in the next season. The tension that we experience is actually storing revelation about God and about ourselves. And this is stored for it to be released to others, not just you. So the tension that you're experiencing in your waiting is not against you, it's for you.
And so grace is that place where it's not you come in and you do their thing, but they come alongside you to really excavate what's the God dream that's been placed inside of you through your story and how they can empower you to live it out.
So what is grace? Grace is every one of us. It's a DNA of a kind of person who, even though on the outside they may look ordinary, believes for the extraordinary that God has placed inside of them. You've just heard stories about how people just like you have attempted these extraordinary things. You've heard the work that God is doing in them and how together they fill out the shadow of who Jesus is in our world.
We wanted to take a minute to celebrate some of the extraordinary things that have happened across the Grace family of churches through people just like you over this last year. To start off, we've seen 157 baptisms across the Grace family of churches. In terms of student ministry, 175 students came to Camp Fallout and 167 students came to Pursuing Passion. Camp Kids Life has over 200 kids, grades 2nd through 5th this year. We've had 17 amazing residents across 7 Grace churches this past year. We've had 3 fellows who have now completed the fellowship program across the family of churches. In terms of church planting, we've seen growth at Grace Lanier. They're moving towards being sustainable as a church plant. Local Church has planted 3 micro churches now, and they're launching 2 more this fall. In terms of ministering to the Muslim world, we were able to rally as a family of churches and raise $71,516 for Afghan relief. Our partner with Engaging Worlds is involved in so many amazing translation projects that are bringing major translations of the Bible to Muslims for the very first time. So we'd love for you to consider giving towards our $150,000 goal this Pentecost. Your giving to this allows us to continue to raise up next generation leaders, support our current churches and plant new churches, and catalyze Jesus movements in the Muslim world. This above and beyond gift isn't in replace of your local giving. We really need that to continue. This is about new churches, new leaders, the new things to come. Each of our Grace churches exists because there was a Grace church before it who chose to be generous today for the future of what God was going to do tomorrow. So this really is an ask to give in faith that God would continue to bring us leaders, continue to lead us to plant new churches. So you can give through this text to give number, or you can also give through the link on your screen. We'd ask that you prayerfully consider joining us in this ask this year towards the 150,000. We're so excited about what God's done over this past year, but we're even more excited about what He's going to do. Every vision requires sacrifice, and we can't get to the future vision that God has for us without giving sacrificially today. Thanks so much for your consideration.